These hidden divisions inside the Mujahideen had their first effects on the Mujahideen forces closest to Kabul, the Shia Muslims. They had been excluded from the interim government. Secure in their mountain fastness, the Sanglak Valley, the Shias were regarded as heretics by ultra-Orthodox Muslims like Hekmatyar. Yet they had resisted the Russians as bravely as anyone. Last year they won a 7-week battle here against a superior force of Soviet paratroopers. When we got there, we found that the Shias were among the best disciplined of all the groups of Mujahideen. Each day their training prepared them for the coming battle for Kabul. They were mostly Mongolian by origin, the descendants of Genghis Khan's men. Over the centuries, for all their toughness, they'd become an underclass inside Kabul. Now they were being turned into a fifth column to undermine the city. Their propaganda was distributed inside Kabul, and they offered to smuggle us into the city to see the resistance there. There was something generous, but also rather naive about them. Their leader, Sheikh Enwari, was prepared to bear the brunt of staging an all-out insurrection inside Kabul if the other Mujahideen groups, the Orthodox Muslim ones, would begin a concerted attack from the outside. He was planning to go to Pakistan to make this offer to the newly formed interim government.
We've reached a critical moment in our struggle for victory. What we want to do now is link up with all the different groups of fighters so that as soon as possible we can move on and capture Kabul without suffering enormous casualties.
We set off for Kabul with a Mujahideen escort. Every major vantage point was guarded by an Afghan army post. On the pathways, there was the constant danger of mines as we made our way across the mountains of the Hindu Kush. Our guides naturally skirted round the army posts as far as possible. But the Afghan army was deeply demoralized, and the soldiers from one base we passed surrendered to us in their entirety, handing over all their weapons. They were anxious to demonstrate their newfound enthusiasm for the Mujahideen cause. Will you now fight the people who used to be your friends?
Yes.
You don't have any worries about fighting your friends and brothers?
No, sir. No.
You will fight, and will Najibullah be defeated?
Yes, we are ready to fight.
In a ruined town on the hills overlooking Kabul, the defectors were treated as honoured recruits to the cause. The Shias, understanding the value of undermining enemy morale, got the new men to call up military headquarters and give them a piece of their mind. Under cover of darkness, we headed into Kabul. The army posts we had to pass were scared of being attacked themselves. The soldiers called out to each other and kept on firing all night long. By dawn, we'd slipped past them. We'd penetrated into Kabul. We were picked up and driven to the centre of town. It was a grim place, a city under siege. We're coming up to another APC here. It felt close to breaking point. Western diplomats had packed up and gone. As an act of bravado, our guides took us to the British embassy so that the head of the resistance could walk past with me on camera. Then, at a safe house, our guides shaved off the beards, which are the mark of the Mujahideen, and waited for two key undercover agents to collect us. Military jeep coming up ahead of us. They drove us round in a government vehicle, which, with consummate cheek, they'd obtained for us. This is clear evidence of the degree to which the resistance movement has penetrated the system in Kabul. We've changed vehicles now, and the one we're in is a jeep belonging to a commander of the Afghan equivalent of the KGB, Jihad. And the two men with us are both officers of Jihad. We were taken on a tour of some of the best guarded places in Kabul, including Jihad headquarters itself and the Soviet embassy. It was distinctly nerve-wracking, but we were able to film everywhere undisturbed because people assumed we were from the secret police. We saw the endless food queues that suggested the city was near collapse. And when we needed petrol, the driver simply commandeered more from the army. Afterwards, while we hid in another safe house, our two double agents told me why they'd taken on the dangerous task of infiltrating the secret police.
Jihad is one of the regime's most hated and feared weapons. Without it, President Najibullah couldn't stay in power. So the Mujahideen have infiltrated it to pave the way for his puppet government's downfall.
The Shias knew the importance of keeping the support of the people. When they arranged an attack, they went to great lengths to avoid killing or injuring ordinary citizens. They had planned a rocket strike against Jihad headquarters, for instance. They deliberately used a Russian watch as a timer. The rocket was to be planted only 50 yards from the target. Even so, it missed, exploding harmlessly on waste ground. We'd been in the city 3 days and were lucky to escape. Agents loyal to Jihad were onto us, and there was a shootout before we got away through the outskirts of the city. But on our return, we found the interim government had refused the Shias' terms for joining them. There would be no uprising in Kabul. The Shias had withdrawn their offer. For Hekmatyar, they were traitors.
It will be strange for us to hear that some of our such brothers have understanding with Kabul regime, and they have stopped fighting against this regime. And I don't think any Muslim can commit such a mistake.
In other words, they weren't even proper Muslims. Despite their steadfastness, the men they'd lost, and the resistance movement they'd built up, the interim government wouldn't include them. It didn't want to have to share power with them after Kabul had fallen. So the Shia threat to Kabul evaporated.